There was this woman named Clara who moved into a small town nobody had ever heard of. She wasn't looking for attention. She just wanted peace. The town was quiet, with old streets and people who knew each other by face, if not always by name. She rented a small apartment above a music school. It wasn't much, just enough space for her things and a small kitchen. But it felt like home. Clara didn't talk much. When she walked through town, she kept her head down and smiled politely. When people greeted her, she wore simple clothes, jeans, sweaters, sometimes a scarf if it was cold. She didn't own a car, so she walked everywhere, to the grocery store, to the post office, sometimes just around the lake on sunny days. The music school below her apartment was run by a man everyone called Mr. Halverson. He taught piano lessons and helped kids prepare for recitals. He was in his 50s with gray hair and a beard that made him look like someone who spent more time with sheet music than people. He loved music deeply, even if he never became famous himself. One morning, as he opened up the school, he saw Clara standing outside one of the practice rooms. She was watching a student play Chopin. Her eyes were soft, focused, not like someone bored or waiting, but like someone listening with care. Mr. Halverson thought maybe she liked music. Maybe she wanted to try playing herself. He approached her gently. "You seem interested," he said with a smile. "Would you like to give it a try?" She looked at him for a moment, then shook her head. "I don't think I'm ready for that." He laughed. "Nobody starts out ready. We all start somewhere." She smiled again, polite but distant. Then she thanked him and walked away. Mr. Halverson watched her go, confused. He thought she was curious, maybe shy, maybe nervous. He decided to offer again another day. A few days later, he left the door open during lunch break. He hoped she might wander in. And sure enough, she did. She stepped inside slowly, like she wasn't sure she should. The room smelled like wood, polish, and old books. A grand piano sat near the window, catching the afternoon light. There were stacks of sheet music on every shelf. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional sound of wind tapping the glass. "You can sit down," Mr. Halverson said from behind his desk. "No need to be shy." Clara hesitated, then walked over to the bench and sat down. Her hands rested lightly on her lap. "Ever played before?" he asked. "A little," she said softly. "Then let's hear something." She looked at him like he'd asked her to fly. "It's been a long time." "That's okay. Music remembers you even if you forget it." She gave a small laugh, almost to herself. Then she placed her hands on the keys. She didn't play right away, just sat there breathing, thinking. Then she began. It started slow, a gentle melody, something familiar. Mr. Halverson recognized it. It was a beginner piece, something most kids learned in their second year. He nodded along, trying not to make her feel awkward, but then something changed. Her fingers began moving faster, not forced, not stiff, but fluid, like water finding its path. The notes came together in ways that weren't on the page. She wasn't just playing the song, she was shaping it, coloring it, making it breathe. Mr. Halverson leaned forward. His tea went cold. He hadn't expected this. She wasn't just good, she was different. When she stopped, she looked up at him, unsure. That was probably too much. "No," he said quickly. "That was amazing." She shrugged. "I used to play a lot, a long time ago. How come you stopped?" She looked away. "Some things change." He wanted to ask more, but he could see the sadness in her eyes, so he didn't push. Instead, he offered her something else. "If you want, I can give you some lessons, free of charge, just to get back into it." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "Maybe someday." And with that, she stood up, brushed her hands against her jeans, and walked out the door. But Mr. Halverson couldn't stop thinking about her, about how she played, about the way the music seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Later that week, he mentioned her to another teacher. "This woman lives upstairs," he said. "She plays like she studied in Vienna or something." The other teacher laughed. "Come on, you're exaggerating." "I swear," Mr. Halverson said, "she doesn't even realize how good she is." They both chuckled, thinking it was just a fun story. But Mr. Halverson knew what he heard. And he also knew that Clara wasn't just any woman who liked music. She was someone who had lived it, known it, maybe even lost it, and now somehow she was back. The music school was buzzing with excitement. It was only a few weeks until their annual recital, an event that brought the whole town together. Kids practiced tirelessly, parents whispered about who would shine brightest, and teachers scrambled to make sure everything went smoothly. But this year there was a problem. One of the advanced students, a teenager everyone expected to play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, had dropped out at the last minute. The piece was famously difficult, full of fast runs, tricky rhythms, and dramatic shifts. Without someone skilled enough to take over, the recital might feel incomplete. Mr. Halverson sat in his office, staring at the sheet music spread across his desk. His colleagues joined him, all looking equally stressed. "We need someone," one of them said. "Someone who can handle this." "Who?" another teacher asked. "Nobody here is ready for something like this." They sighed, frustrated. Then, almost as if on cue, they heard laughter coming from the hallway. Turning toward the sound, they saw Clara walking by with a cup of tea in hand. She looked calm, unaware of the chaos brewing inside the room. One of the teachers smirked. "What about her?" Everyone turned to look at him, confused. "Her?" Mr. Halverson repeated. "You mean Clara?" "Why not?" The teacher shrugged. "She lives upstairs. We could ask her to give it a shot." At first, no one took the idea seriously. They laughed, imagining how awkward it would be if she tried and failed to play such a challenging piece. But the more they thought about it, the funnier it seemed. What were the chances she'd actually agree? And even if she did, what harm could come from it? So, half-jokingly, they decided to invite her. Later that afternoon, Clara came downstairs after hearing a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found Mr. Halverson standing there with two other teachers. They greeted her warmly, complimenting her on how quiet and peaceful she kept the building. Then, without wasting much time, they got to the point. "We're having our yearly recital soon," Mr. Halverson explained, "and we have this little challenge. There's a very difficult piano piece we need someone to try, just for fun." Clara tilted her head slightly, curious. "Difficult?" "Yes," one of the teachers chimed in. "It's called Hungarian Rhapsody. Have you heard of it?" "I've heard of Liszt," she replied carefully. "But I haven't played anything like that in years." "Well, maybe you should give it a try," another teacher said enthusiastically. "Just to see what happens." Clara hesitated. She wasn't sure why they were asking her or why they seemed so amused. Still, she didn't want to disappoint them. After a brief pause, she nodded. "Okay, I'll give it a try." The teachers exchanged glances, trying hard not to laugh. They led her to the main practice room where the grand piano stood waiting. As she approached the bench, they handed her the sheet music. She glanced at it briefly, then set it aside. "You don't need that?" one of them asked, surprised. "No," she said softly. "I remember it." Their smiles faltered for a moment. Could she really know the piece by heart? Or was she just being polite? She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. For a second, the room fell silent. Everyone leaned in, unsure of what to expect. Then she began to play. The opening notes rang out clearly, bold and confident. Her fingers moved effortlessly, weaving through the intricate passages with precision. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Mouths dropped open, eyes widened. No one spoke. As the piece progressed, Clara seemed to disappear into the music. Every note carried emotion, joy, longing, defiance, all wrapped up in cascading melodies. That filled the room. The teachers forgot they were supposed to be joking around. They forgot they were testing her. All they could do was listen. When she reached the final crescendo, the entire room held its breath. Then, as the last chord faded, silence hung heavy in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Finally, one of the teachers broke the spell. "Wow," he whispered. Another clapped hesitantly, followed by the rest of them erupting into applause. Clara turned to face them, her expression calm but tinged with amusement. She knew exactly what had happened. "That was incredible," Mr. Halverson said, still struggling to find words. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Clara hesitated before answering. "I used to perform professionally, a long time ago." The teachers stared at her, stunned. None of them had guessed she had such a background. They bombarded her with questions. Where had she performed? Why had she stopped? Had she ever recorded anything? She answered patiently, revealing bits of her past. She told them she had once been known on the concert circuit, but left it all behind after growing tired of the pressure and losing someone close to her. She hadn't touched a piano in years, she admitted, until recently. By the time she finished speaking, the teachers were speechless. They apologized for treating her like an amateur earlier, but she waved it off with a smile. "It's okay," she said. "I understand." Still, the weight of what they had witnessed lingered in the air. They realized they weren't dealing with just any neighbor. Clara was extraordinary. Now, faced with her undeniable talent, they had to rethink their plans for the recital. Did they dare ask her to perform publicly? Would she even consider it? For now, though, none of them pushed the issue. They simply thanked her and let her return to her apartment, leaving the teachers to process what they had just experienced. They cleaned up the practice room later. One of them summed it up perfectly. "We thought we were playing a joke. Turns out the joke was on us." The next few days were strange for Clara. She tried to go about her life as usual, taking quiet walks by the lake, reading books in her apartment, sipping tea while listening to the distant hum of students practicing below. But things weren't quite the same anymore. The music teachers kept stopping by, sometimes casually, sometimes with clear purpose. They'd invite her for coffee or ask if she needed anything from the store. It was obvious they wanted to talk to her again, but she didn't give them much of an opening. One evening, just as the sun was setting, there was another knock on her door. When she opened it, Mr. Halverson stood there, holding a folder. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure what to say. "Can we talk?" he asked. Clara stepped aside, letting him in. He sat down at her small dining table, placing the folder in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "About the other day," he started. "When you played that piece?" She nodded, waiting. "We had no idea," he continued. "I mean, none of us expected, well, you know." Clara smiled faintly. "It's okay. I understand why you thought it would be funny." He shook his head. "No, it's not okay. We treated you like someone who wouldn't know better. And then you showed us something incredible, something unforgettable." There was sincerity in his voice, and Clara softened. She sat down across from him, folding her hands on the table. "What do you want to say?" He hesitated before answering. "We're having our recital soon. As you know, we don't have anyone prepared to play Hungarian Rhapsody. Not properly anyway, so..." He paused, gathering courage. "Would you consider performing? Just this once?" Clara stiffened slightly. Performing again, that was something she hadn't even considered. She'd left that world behind years ago, vowing never to return. The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny, it had all been too much. She'd walked away because she needed peace. "I don't think so," she said finally. "I'm not ready for that." Mr. Halverson leaned forward, his tone gentle but insistent. "You don't have to do it for fame or money. Do it for the people here. For the kids who dream of being where you've already been. You could inspire them, show them what's possible." Clara looked away, staring out the window at the fading light. Memories flooded back. The applause, the standing ovations, the late-night rehearsals. And then the loneliness. The feeling of losing herself in a life that belonged to everyone except her. I used to love playing, she admitted quietly. But I also lost a lot because of it. My family, my freedom, and everything felt like it slipped through my fingers. Mr. Halverson listened carefully, nodding. That's understandable, but maybe this time could be different. This isn't about chasing perfection or pleasing critics. This is about sharing something beautiful with people who truly appreciate it. For a long moment, Clara didn't respond. Then she reached for the folder he'd brought with him. Inside were notes about the recital schedule, program details, and a handwritten letter from one of the students. The letter read, "Dear Mystery Piano Lady, if you decide to play, I hope you know how much it would mean to me. I've been learning piano for 2 years now, and hearing you play made me realize how far I still have to go. If you perform, I promise to work harder. Thank you for reminding me why I love music." Clara's eyes welled up as she finished reading. She hadn't expected gratitude like this, not from strangers, not after so many years away from the stage. Slowly, she closed the folder and looked at Mr. Halverson. "I'll think about it," she said softly. Over the next week, Clara found herself unable to stop thinking about the request. She replayed the conversation in her mind, over and over. At first, she resisted the idea. Going back on stage, even for a small recital, felt like stepping into a past she'd worked hard to leave behind. But as the days passed, something shifted. One afternoon, she wandered into the music school while the teachers were busy teaching lessons. She heard snippets of melodies floating through the halls, children struggling with scales, teenagers working on simple pieces, adults fumbling through chords. Each sound reminded her of her own journey, the early struggles, the breakthroughs, the moments when everything clicked into place. Then she noticed a young boy sitting alone in a corner, plucking at a keyboard. He looked frustrated, his brow furrowed as he tried repeatedly to master a short phrase. Finally, he slammed his hands down in defeat. "I'll never get it," he muttered. Clara approached him slowly. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked. The boy shrugged, scooting over to make room. She pressed a few keys, demonstrating the phrase he'd been stuck on. "Try this," she said. "Break it into smaller parts. Focus on one note at a time." He followed her instructions, his face lighting up when he finally got it right. "Thanks," he said, grinning. "You're really good," she smiled back. "So are you. Keep practicing." As she walked away, she realized something important. Music wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to these kids, these teachers, this little community. Maybe she couldn't change the world, but she could share a piece of herself, and maybe, just maybe, help others find their own voices. That night, she called Mr. Halverson. "I'll do it," she said simply. On the other end of the line, he exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said. "You won't regret it." Preparing for the recital wasn't easy. Clara spent hours rehearsing, revisiting old techniques she hadn't used in years. Sometimes doubts crept in. What if she froze on stage? What if the audience saw her as nothing more than a relic of the past? But every time she felt unsure, she remembered the boy in the hallway, the student's letter, the teacher's hopeful faces. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone, not even to herself. It was about connection, about giving back. By the time the recital arrived, word had spread throughout the town. People whispered excitedly about the mysterious woman who played, like a professional. Some came out of curiosity, others came because they loved live music. Either way, the hall filled quickly, buzzing with anticipation. Clara stood backstage, peeking through the curtain. Her heart raced, but she felt calm somehow. As she waited for her turn, she thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her here. Life had taken her far from the stage, but now, for one night, she was stepping back into the spotlight. And this time, it felt different. The night of the recital arrived, and the small town hall was packed. People filled every seat, some even standing along the walls or sitting on folding chairs brought in last minute. The air buzzed with excitement. Whispers about the mystery pianist floated through the crowd. No one knew much about her except that she lived above the music school and had stunned the teachers with her talent during a casual practice session. Rumors ranged from wild guesses about her being a retired prodigy to theories that she might have performed at famous concert halls decades ago. Whatever the truth, everyone wanted to see her play. Clara stood backstage, hidden behind a heavy, velvet curtain. She could hear the murmur of voices, the shuffle of feet, the occasional cough echoing through the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the sleeves of her black dress. A simple outfit she'd chosen because it felt comfortable, not flashy. She wasn't here to make a statement. She just wanted to share something honest. Mr. Halverson appeared beside her, his face glowing with pride and nerves. "You ready?" he asked softly. She took a deep breath, then nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." He smiled reassuringly. "Just remember, you're doing this for yourself, not for anyone else." His words stayed with her as she stepped onto the stage. The moment she walked out, the chatter died down, replaced by an expectant silence. Every eye in the room turned toward her. For a second she froze, overwhelmed by the weight of all those gazes. Then she reminded herself why she was here. Not for fame or applause, but to connect, to show these people what music meant to her. She approached the piano slowly, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. When she reached the bench, she paused, running her fingers lightly over its edge. It felt familiar, like greeting an old friend after years apart. She sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Then, without warning, she began to play. It started softly, a single note, clear and pure, hanging in the air like the first drop of rain. Slowly, more notes joined in, weaving together into a melody that seemed to rise from somewhere deep within her soul. The piece was Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, the same one that had shocked the teachers weeks earlier. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it wasn't just a technical showcase. It was a story, a tale of loss, resilience, and rediscovery, and her fingers danced across the keys. The audience leaned forward, captivated. The music swelled and dipped, building to breathtaking crescendos before retreating into delicate whispers. Each note carried emotion, joy, sorrow, defiance, all layered into a tapestry of sound that filled the room. Clara closed her eyes, letting the music take her away. For those few minutes, she wasn't just a woman playing a piano. She was a conduit for something greater, channeling everything she'd experienced into something beautiful. When she reached the final bars, the energy in the room shifted. The audience held their breath, waiting for the last chord to ring out. And when it did, the silence that followed was profound. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, someone began to clap. A single pair of hands at first, hesitant but heartfelt. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause. People stood cheering wildly. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others simply stared, awestruck. Clara sat motionless for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then slowly she rose from the bench and bowed deeply, her face flushed with both gratitude and humility. As she stepped off stage, Mr. Halverson greeted her with a wide grin. "You did it," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You really did it." She smiled faintly. "I guess I did." Backstage, Clara found herself surrounded by students, parents, and teachers, all eager to meet her. They showered her with praise, thanking her for such an unforgettable performance. One little girl handed her a drawing, a stick figure at a piano with the words, "Thank you for making me believe I can do it too," scrawled across the top. Clara knelt down to hug the child, her throat tight with emotion. But amid the celebration, there were moments of quiet reflection. As the crowd thinned and the noise faded, Clara wandered back to the piano. She sat down again, this time alone, and let her fingers drift lazily over the keys. She played snippets of songs she hadn't touched in years, melodies that reminded her of happier times, sadder times, everything in between. It struck her then how much she'd missed this, not the applause or the attention, but the act of creating something meaningful. Music had always been her anchor, her way of expressing what words couldn't capture. Somewhere along the way, she'd let go of that, thinking she needed to escape the pressures of her past. But now, sitting here in this tiny town hall, she realized she didn't have to run anymore. She could embrace music again, not as a burden, but as a gift. The next morning, life in the town returned to normal. Kids went back to school, parents resumed their routines, and the music school reopened for lessons. But something had changed. Clara noticed it immediately. Students greeted her warmly when they saw her, calling her Miss Clara and asking if she'd teach them how to play like she did. Parents stopped her on the street to thank her for inspiring their children. Even strangers who had attended the recital approached her, sharing how her performance had moved them. At first, Clara resisted the idea of teaching. She didn't want to take on the responsibility or risk falling back into the same patterns that had driven her away from performing in the first place. But the requests kept coming, each one more heartfelt than the last. Finally, she agreed to give it a try. Her first lesson was with a shy teenager who struggled to keep rhythm. Clara sat beside him, guiding his hands gently, showing him how to feel the music rather than just play it. By the end of the session, he was smiling, proud of the progress he'd made. That smile stayed with Clara long after the lesson ended. It reminded her of why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place. The way it brought people together, helping them find beauty even in imperfection. Word spread quickly about her lessons. Soon the music school was flooded with inquiries from students eager to learn from her. Mr. Halverson offered her a permanent spot on the faculty, but she declined, opting instead to teach privately. She preferred working one-on-one, focusing on nurturing each student's unique voice rather than adhering to rigid schedules or expectations. Despite her growing popularity, Clara remained humble. She refused interviews and turned down offers from agents trying to revive her career. Fame wasn't what she wanted anymore. What mattered to her was the connection, the chance to inspire others and remind them of the power of art to heal and transform. By the time winter rolled around, Clara had settled into her new role as a mentor. She spent her days teaching, composing, small pieces for fun, and occasionally performing at local events. Her apartment above the music school became a haven for creativity, filled with laughter, learning, and the constant hum of music drifting through the air. And though she never sought recognition, the town embraced her as one of their own. She wasn't just a talented musician. She was proof that greatness often hides in the most unassuming places, and that sometimes all it takes is a little courage to step back into the light. Winter had settled over the town, bringing with it frosty mornings and cozy afternoons. The music school buzzed with energy, thanks in large part to Clara. Though she hadn't planned to become such a central figure in the community, her presence had transformed the place and the people around her in ways no one could have predicted. Every morning, Clara walked downstairs from her apartment, carrying a thermos of tea and a notebook filled with scribbled melodies. She didn't teach formal classes like the other instructors. Instead, she worked privately with students who needed extra guidance or encouragement. Some were beginners, struggling to find their rhythm. Others were advanced players who wanted to explore deeper emotions in their performances. No matter their skill level, Clara approached each lesson with patience and care, helping them discover the joy of playing, not just for perfection, but for connection. One of her regular students was a young boy named Alex. He was only 10 years old, but he practiced relentlessly, determined to master Beethoven's Fur-Elise. Every time he stumbled over the same tricky section, frustration would bubble up, and he'd slam his hands against the keys. Clara never scolded him. Instead, she sat beside him, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "You're not alone," she said one afternoon. "Everyone gets stuck sometimes, even me." Alex looked at her, wide-eyed. "Really? You get stuck too?" She nodded. "Of course, but here's the secret. When you hit a wall, you don't give up. You find a way around it. Break it into smaller pieces. Focus on one note at a time." He tried again, slower this time, following her advice. When he finally played the passage smoothly, his face lit up with pride. "I did it," he exclaimed. Clara smiled. "See? You always knew how." Moments like these reminded her why she'd decided to stay involved. Teaching wasn't about showing off her expertise. It was about giving others the tools to express themselves, and every breakthrough, no matter how small, felt like a victory. But it wasn't just the students who benefited. From Clara's influence, parents began stopping by the school more often, eager to hear updates about their children's progress. They'd linger in the lounge, sipping coffee and chatting with Mr. Halverson or the other teachers. Over time, they started asking Clara questions, not just about music, but about life. How had she stayed so calm under pressure? What kept her going during tough times? She answered honestly, sharing bits of her journey without making herself the center of attention. Her stories resonated deeply. Many of the parents admitted they'd lost touch with their own passions, painting, writing, singing, because life got busy. Inspired by Clara's example, some even signed up for adult beginner classes at the school. On Friday evenings, you could hear laughter and clinking glasses as these grown-ups gathered for group lessons, rediscovering the joy of learning something new. The ripple effect of Clara's presence spread beyond the music school. Local businesses noticed an uptick in customers, especially on weekends when families came to attend recitals or workshops. Cafes set up special discounts for students and teachers. The bookstore stocked more sheet music and biographies of famous composers. Even the library hosted monthly discussions about classical music, drawing crowds of curious townsfolk. It wasn't long before word reached the local newspaper. A reporter visited the school, hoping to interview Clara about her mysterious past and sudden rise to prominence in the community. Clara politely declined, explaining that she preferred to keep her story private. The reporter respected her wishes, but wrote a glowing article anyway, focusing on the impact she'd made rather than her personal history. Some people carry greatness quietly, the article concluded. And in doing so, they remind us that talent isn't about fame. It's about sharing something meaningful with the world. The piece touched hearts across the region. People drove from neighboring towns to attend Clara's occasional performances or simply to meet her. She welcomed them warmly, always emphasizing that music belonged to everyone, not just professionals. Despite the growing attention, Clara remained grounded. She continued teaching, composing, and performing locally, choosing projects that aligned with her values. One project she particularly loved was recording short albums of original pieces to raise money for charity. She donated the proceeds to organizations supporting mental health awareness and arts education for underserved communities. Recording sessions took place in the school's main hall late at night, when everything else was quiet. Clara played, softly, letting the melodies flow naturally. Sometimes she invited students to join her, creating collaborative pieces that blended classical techniques with modern influences. These recordings became cherished treasures for those lucky enough to own a copy. Her favorite memory from one of these sessions happened unexpectedly. After finishing a heartfelt solo, she turned to find several students standing in the doorway, listening silently. Their faces glowed with admiration. "We didn't mean to interrupt," one of them whispered. We wanted to hear you play." Clara gestured for them to come closer. "Music is meant to be shared," she said. "Never apologize for wanting to listen." They stayed for hours talking about their dreams and fears, bonding over their shared love of music. For Clara, moments like these were priceless. They reminded her that art wasn't just about notes on a page. It was about building connections, fostering understanding, and creating spaces where people felt seen and valued. As spring approached, Clara found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed since moving to the town. At first, she'd sought solitude, a chance to retreat from the pressures of her former career. But now she realized she'd gained something far greater, a sense of belonging. She thought about the boy who'd struggled with Furilis, the parents rediscovering their creativity, the reporters marveling at her humility. Each interaction had taught her something new about resilience, compassion, and the power of community. Music had brought her back to herself, and in doing so, it had allowed her to help others do the same. On the last day of winter, Clara stood outside the music school watching the sun set behind the hills. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the promise of warmer days ahead. She took a deep breath, feeling grateful for the path she'd taken. Little did she know, the best chapter of her story was yet to come. Spring arrived gently in the small town, painting the world with bursts of color. The trees blossomed, the air warmed, and life seemed to hum with a quiet energy. For Clara, this season marked a turning point, not just in the calendar, but in her own story. By now, she had become a fixture in the community. Her lessons weren't just about teaching piano. They were about instilling confidence, patience, and a love for learning. Every student who walked into her makeshift studio left feeling inspired, even if they hadn't mastered a single piece yet. Some came back years later, sharing stories of how her guidance had shaped their lives. One former student wrote her a letter saying he'd switched his college major to music education because of her encouragement. Another sent photos of her performing at a local cafe, grinning from ear to ear as she played one of Clara's original compositions. Clara kept these mementos tucked away in a wooden box under her bed. On quiet evenings, she'd take them out and flip through them, smiling at the memories. Each note, each photo reminded her that her decision to stay, to share her gift, had mattered more than she ever imagined. But there was something else, brewing too. Over the past few months, whispers had spread among the townsfolk about organizing a special event, a tribute concert dedicated to Clara. At first, Mr. Halverson tried to keep it a secret, knowing how much she disliked being the center of attention. But word got out anyway, and soon everyone wanted to participate. When Clara finally heard about it, she was surprised and a little overwhelmed. "You don't have to do this," she told Mr. Halverson when he broke the news. "Really, I'm happy just doing what I'm doing." He shook his head firmly. "This isn't about obligation. It's about gratitude. You've given so much to this town, Clara. Let us give something back." She hesitated, unsure, but when she saw how excited everyone was, the students practicing tirelessly, the parents volunteering to decorate, the shopkeepers donating snacks and flowers, she realized she couldn't say no. Not because she craved recognition, but because it meant so much to them. The night of the tribute concert arrived and the town hall overflowed with people. Chairs lined every inch of space, and still, some stood along the walls or sat cross-legged on the floor. Children clutched handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Miss Clara," while adults held programs listing all the performances planned for the evening. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, laughter, and occasional tears. As Clara stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. She waved shyly, motioning for them to settle down. When the room quieted, she spoke softly into the microphone. "Didn't expect any of this," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "When I moved here, I thought I was looking for peace. What I found instead was family. All of you welcomed me in ways I'll never forget. And tonight, well, tonight feels like a celebration of something bigger than me. Music has always been about connection, for me, for you, for everyone here. So thank you. Thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with it in the first place." Her words hung in the air, met with heartfelt cheers. Then, the show began. One by one, her students took the stage, each playing pieces they'd worked on with her. Some stumbled over notes, others soared effortlessly, but every performance carried emotion, effort, and pride. Between acts, parents shared stories of how Clara had changed their children's lives. A father recounted how his daughter, once painfully shy, had gained confidence after weeks of private lessons. A grandmother teared up talking about how her grandson rediscovered his passion for music thanks to Clara's encouragement. When the final student finished their piece, Clara returned to the stage for a solo performance. This time she chose a melody of her own, a gentle, flowing composition that reflected her journey over the past year. As her fingers danced across the keys, the audience closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. It wasn't flashy or complicated, it was honest, raw, and deeply moving. When the last note faded, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, People rose to their feet, applauding louder than ever before. Clara bowed deeply, her cheeks flushed with emotion. She scanned the crowd, meeting familiar faces and seeing strangers brought together by a shared appreciation for art and kindness. After the concert ended, the celebration spilled outside. Lanterns lit up the streets, casting a golden glow over the festivities. People lingered, chatting and laughing late into the night. Clara wandered among them, accepting hugs, handshakes, and heartfelt thanks. Though she'd never sought fame, she felt truly seen in a way she hadn't in years.